Dragon Age Inquisition was released in 2014 for the PC, PlayStation, and Xbox consoles. It was developed by BioWare and handcrafted to provide us with the wealthiest immersion. BioWare developed a website called the Dragon Age Keep that allowed us to establish a history to our storyline by reiterating the two prequels to Inquisition's fate, or to completely begin a new heroic journey through the history of Dragon Age in case you've never played the two. With that being said, I was attached to my character with generations of solid history put in place all by me. The game begins with a quick creation to your character's race, class, and background. It follows suit with most games of the fantasy genre, offering a variation of swordsman, bowman, or mage, each offering their own benefits and their own faults that help balance out classes from one another. Once we have selected, and as the green smoke fades, we see our character kneeling, which leads to the customizable screen. Now I know it's difficult to hide the identity of your character versus that of the default character from BioWare. I do have to respect the decision to choose your gender before entering the prequel cutscene, because I could see that setting off a few alarms if the protagonist was defaulted male and then altered to a female. But I feel like that scene could have been completely avoided if the green smoke faded to the custom screen completely rather than the character kneeling. It's not that big of a deal, just something we could have avoided. I do want to admire how much effort was put into the customizable screen. The characters look terrific, and I could see BioWare really put a lot of effort into detail. This is one of their biggest single player projects, so it's nice to see it as polished as it looks. I think it wouldn't be a stretch to reiterate BioWare's focus on detail and really touch up on the attention of player engagement. We begin learning how to play the game through an interactive, cinematic experience, rather than putting a tutorial with a do what I say when I'm done saying it. The first portion of tutorials lie intertwined with choices between dialogue. It would make sense that the time it takes for you to read the tutorial and the replies to Cassandra would take a while. You are technically a prisoner where any wrong answer could be your life, so it only makes sense as to why you, as a character, would think before you say what you're going to say. When the game reaches gameplay, the tutorial lies transparent to the screen parallel to the character. It's visible enough for the first-time user, but passive for a player who has a good idea of the control scheme so they could ignore it. It makes for an easy second playthrough, knowing that they are there if support is needed. I think the transitions and cutscenes in Inquisition are developed really well in this game, and do a really good job solidifying the plotline. BioWare is one of those companies that produce the best possible product with narrative. Granted, Mass Effect took a turn for the worse, and Dragon Age 2 seemed a little hollow compared to Origins, but as far as tightly sophisticated narratives, I can tell this isn't just another game for the writer's resume to score a new job with. What is most impressive about BioWare is their focus on the bigger picture and integrating the main character along with it. Most games released in the past decade rely heavily on the narrative of the playable protagonist. Whether it be Red Dead Redemption, Last of Us, or Heavy Rain, we see a focus on the deeper involvement of the protagonist's motives and ambitions, which I have no problem with. I think those companies as well as those games do a phenomenal job at doing so. But what I admire from BioWare is their focus on supporting characters. This approach helps bring a better integration of narrative to the game. Each supporting character's agenda unfolds as our characters develop. This type of depth helps give the stereotypical template of a character a unique personality that can impress an interesting element to the companion feature. It's nice that BioWare can roll out these backstories through first-hand experience without feeling like they have to shoehorn a character history into the characters, hoping to have engaged us in an emotional bond with them. Companions offer loyalty missions that help build the approval ratings between character a little bit. Personally, I felt that Iron Bull's loyalty mission stuck out the most to me. He spent a majority of his personal missions getting to know him and his culture, which for me, I really enjoyed his character. And I felt the culture of Canary was interesting and unique to what the social norms are to us outside of the game. At the end of this loyalty strain, BioWare has you choose between helping the Canary, which are his people, versus helping his own team, the Chargers, which you grow fond of. This choice is really tough for me, and I don't think it would have been as serious if I had not been provided the events leading up to that mission to get an emotional attachment to him. Now, I personally romanced with Cassandra and found that I appreciated her open-mindedness to me being an elf who believes in the old gods. But I do want to say, I was a bit concerned with the way they implemented the homosexual partnering. I'm not saying I don't like it, nor am I saying it's wrong. I completely appreciate the effort to desensitize those who are off-put by it, but judging by the setting of the game, and by paralleling it to the 12th century medieval times, homosexuality was considered punishable by death, and the characters were just a little outspoken about it. But yeah, you're right, this is not medieval Europe, this is Dragon Age of Thetis. But there's a difference between being bold and selling a product. I just think they bought a foreign car and painted it neon yellow. It's a foreign car, so you will be getting looks from people. But I mean, yellow neoning that bitch just seems like you pushed the envelope with this one. We get it. It was a bold move, and you want us to see that. I feel like the presence of it in the game almost detracts from what they want it to do, as if they are insecure about the element and overhype it to mask their feelings about it. But regardless, the narrative written to fulfill the homosexual requisite does a good job. When it wasn't feeling too forced, I think the few side missions that involved homosexuality really did a fine job implicating it as is. These side missions, as well as the story mission, progress at a steady pace. Unlike Bethesda's complex and elaborate detail of every character involved in their games, Inquisition is less convoluted while still getting the main point across. The interaction and development between the Inquisition leaders, Josephine, Leliana, and Colin, are as charming as ever. They really set the pins in place for the plotline, each character supporting the Inquisition as well as being eminent figures with their own respective goals. I found their animations in the war room to be very reminiscent to old school sprites. I love how interacting with them will trigger them to have the same animation throughout the game. That's aside the point I want to make. I enjoy how they help progress a story mission. Dragon Age has a focus on dialogue mechanics being a major gameplay aspect. With the interaction between your Inquisition, supporting characters, or random NPCs, you can expect an influence on the world, dependent on the choices you make. Unfortunately, and this goes for a lot of games that incorporate this is not going to make that big change to narrative that most people expect. Most choices will fall short term unless it's regarding your companions and trailing the road to losing them. Although the options seem to present the Inquisitor with risky decisions, they'll fall short of ever really influencing the game. You are more or less choosing between replying with social etiquette, with an edgy tone, or being a complete dick. But I mean, I haven't seen many games really grasp this concept of branching storylines like I mentioned before. Video games that rely on choice to drive the game don't necessarily diverge as often as they market themselves to do. But with that said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. These games rely on personalities and relationships to drive the dialogue end of things. But that's fine. I don't necessarily play games with heavy emphasis on dialogue. I do love heavy narrative games, just nothing that demands choice with no backbone to support it. Heavy Rain is an exception. I feel they did a phenomenal job entertaining the player with choice and consequence. Choice and consequence is a lot more hands-on in Dragon Age, and I believe that this is where the engagement begins. After what feels like a good introduction to Dragon Age Inquisition, we wake up in Haven, which presents itself a chance to relax and catch your breath. Haven seems to be an area to understand the environment and to adapt to the control scheme. Let the events of what just happened soak in, and let the plot line deepen. With easy A to B tutorial missions and a majority of lively NPCs, the only enemies are neutral until attacked. It is a nice place to familiarize yourself with how BioWare will be presenting their locations. Don't expect much to happen until you are ready for it. Progression is slow and steady. I found myself spending countless hours exploring hinterlands and familiarizing myself with the culture of it all. I'm sure I speak for a lot of people when I address how hard it was to leave the hinterlands, as I am a perfectionist, and there were too many great side missions for me to indulge in. At first glance, the amounted space and long list of side missions could be seen as padding. It's nice to see in every level that every nook and cranny is alive and well. If it's not a troubled NPC, you can expect missions featuring comedic relief, enemies both alive or dead, and most importantly, how capturing the setting and theme are at taking cues from the Renaissance. I think it's most fitting and it deserves an applause to how fantastic it looks. The direction and concept art for the world defines BioWare's talents. If you do find yourself patrolling the lands, you'd find yourself at awe with the view and surprisingly never feeling satisfied with how much of the world you'd want to soak up before engaging in another battle between you and the Venatori. You can expect nothing less of this high fantasy semi-open world novel. Speaking of open world, and why I say semi, is I think I'm a bit disappointed with the open world element we were all hyped up to receive. When I hear of a marriage between Skyrim and Mass Effect, I would hope for the Inquisition to acquire the genes of the former. It does deliver a nice map with a healthy amount of exploration, but the limitations in the world map popping doesn't mask the truth for what it is, but it can mend the broken bone. Dragon Age Inquisition's open world element does deliver, but I mean, it's not Amazon Prime. It's difficult for RPGs to measure their success to the RPG standard, set by the few powerhouse concepts seen in Skyrim, World of Warcraft, and dare I say it, Fable. Wherever Dragon Age falls short in the RPG culture, it makes up for in combat. BioWare creates a hybrid between a tactical turn-based RPG and a third-person hack and slasher. It preserves originality in every sense, being that it considers both elements to really captivate a battle. I can position and control my team while considering my own enemies. I could command my companions during real time using a command wheel, or I could target and attack enemies in the bird's eye tactical view. I found myself taking advantage of both elements depending on the size of the battle, who I was fighting, and in which order I'd present my skills. I had two playthroughs of Dragon Age, one I began on hard and the second I tackled on nightmare. The decisions I made during my second playthrough were a bit more practical, having I had 60 hours of experience prior to getting into the nightmare run. The skill tree represented in Dragon Age does a great job capturing the essentials it needs to provide itself worthy of having a skill tree and not being another bandwagoning video game with the marketing pitch others call a leveling up system. With each skill point comes a long journey contemplating the perks and the disadvantages of each skill and how I could go about incorporating it into my playstyle. I played both a rogue artificer and a mage knight enchanter for my two playthroughs. While rather enjoying my mage playthrough a lot and not feeling very similar to my rogue playthrough, I felt I began to appreciate my rogue playthrough in hindsight. Why I am mentioning this is because both classes, while being unique in every obvious sense, I had effective class skills. On top of micromanaging each companion to my liking with the variety of playstyles I could imagine, my main focus and what I will focus on for this review is my Knight Enchanter Mage. The mage offers the quintessential passive and active abilities you'd expect a mage to have: Inferno for high damage with the slowed regeneration, Spirit, which is for spell cancels, defensive barriers, and healers, Storm for buying time and damage combos, and Winter for weakens and speed reductions. I would mix a few of those with their specializations, including harsher magical weapons, stronger defenses, or enemy controlling spells, and I have one hell of a badass. They pose very useful and have a tendency to feel limited. I mean this in the sense that we want what we can't have. I want every spell available, but I can only have so much. I truly enjoyed that aspect of the game, which would pressure me to have a second playthrough to experience a different style of integrating spells with different playstyles. As much as I appreciated my Mage Enchanter being completely and utterly fixed, I found myself struggling with an appropriate way to perform with my Rogue. I can confidently say I loved both playthroughs and I would change nothing about them. There was something about the time investment I had calculating out the perfect team of DPS, tanks, and healers that I have grown very fond of my team. I've spent countless periods of time focusing on every detail between class skills and making sure I fully understand what each skill offers, as well as making sure their assigned location on my hotbar were efficient with my playstyle. See, BioWare made sure that the button setup was ideal for an RPG RTS, even though a few of the configured buttons felt a bit like a stretch. The wheel that opens up dialogue and supporting character tactics are one button shy from opening up your second hotbar for slot spells. The R1 is one of your spells, along with the 4 buttons on your right hand, and your R2 are basic attacks. The touchpad opens up the RTS tactical play. The pause menu offers level ups, maps, journal entries, and take you to your next quest screen. And did I make my point? I'm sure this game is targeted for PC, and honestly I'd be surprised if it wasn't, because it probably did a great job mapping everything accordingly. But their cluttered attempt on the PlayStation and Xbox won't go unnoticed. I couldn't think of a better way to present this, so I commend them. Honestly, sometimes clutter is not always a bad thing, and I'd like you to take that sometimes with a grain of salt. What I am referring to is the Dragon Age weapon and armor abundance. I am a firm believer that a player can utilize one set of attire and one weapon to the best of their ability without needing to acquire a padded amount of toys, playing themselves as necessary additions to a game. Unfortunately, Dragon Age tends to nod off into that direction. Regardless of each equipment piece that can or cannot function from your specific race, class, or level, it is still bound by the chains of useless utility. I hate finding a new piece of armor that could benefit me by a hair, which can render my current piece useless. I mean, I would find this appropriate if each piece's appearance was indisputably different from one another, but Dragon Age flopped with an aesthetically standout look to their weapons and equipment. It's a stretch, but I guess I could consider their equipment and weapon crafting options an opportunity to rekindle my detest toward their padding. But I mean, once you've harvested enough dragon scales and bones, you can consider crafting to be obsolete because it'd be so powerful by then. Whether or not you think runes can make a difference, it's a needle in a haystack. The Dragon Age grind had its ups and downs, but before I go on, yes, the grind was bearable. I got to give it to the visuals, creating a rich setting, and the lore of Thetis channeling every inch of detail within letters, NPCs, and war table missions. It is all an engagement on their own. But I eventually found that on my second playthrough, I had a harder time considering the A to B missions a gameplay feature I would pursue with the drop of a hat. I started questioning my loyalty to BioWare's attempt to fill the game with countless hours of leveling up just to reach par for the next story mission. I felt deceived. A once phenomenal RPG, though not perfect, diluting my interest with every collection quest. But then I remembered. This game presented itself with a hierarchy of quest options from the start. You have the capital Q story missions, you have the bigger, meatier quests that do just that, and then you have the NPC fetch quests that always feel like fillers. Yes, they have the to-do checklist of collect this many's and fetch these, but they aren't necessary, and definitely can be ignored with no hindrance to the gameplay. But I'll single out my perfectionist really quick, and this is my problem. Yes, I spent my first playthrough collecting every shard in Thetis to reveal what was at the end of the Elysian Temple, and yes, I was getting frustrated by the 80th shard. But you know what? It was my decision, and I could have completely refused to do this if I was just fixed on beating the game. But that's why I chose to play this RPG, to grasp the game in its entirety, to feel that triumph as I opened the last door, and to continue my grind to perfect the game and add a platinum to my collection. So yes, the game has a grind, and I can share my pain with a fellow perfectionist, but it is truly optional. Was it a harsh grind? Yeah, it was. But would it have to be? Only if you make it. Again, these meteor quests make up for the filler by a tenfold. Aside from the stated earlier, I think the dragon grind was more than everything I wanted. 10 different dragons, all 10 offering a rugged battle. Each battle complemented by a harshly heroic OST supporting our patriotism to our country. Even if you say you found the perfect strategy to take down each dragon every time, you have to admit it was thrilling. The dragons were a part of the meteor quest and were handled very well by BioWare. The glory in a quest definitely goes to their primary narrative, though. I think the story missions grabbed the narrative by the hand and led us in the right direction every step of the way. I feel the Winter Palace and the Fate of Selene was a beautifully crafted change of pace, and I think the choices that were made that did have a lasting effect on our story mode appealed to emotion like no other. All provided with more power over our Herald and Inquisition, and with power comes more missions. What I had a problem with these missions and how much power it takes to unlock these missions is that it falls short at delivering us a fair advantage. Unfortunately, every war table option costs power to unlock and will always expect more out of you with every unlock. I found this a bummer. Being that I could not stand my second playthrough being overcrowded with missions, I were uncomfortable playing a second time. It was more getting started was the pain in the ass. But while I was there, I guess I was enjoying my time. Collecting power comes easy when you get lost in the game. But seeing a power of 10 need another 20 after you have unlocked that to open the next mission can be a bit discouraging. I think that power was hard to obtain so that players would be forced to appreciate the effort in the art direction and the writers that put so much time into the lore without feeling harassed into it. Like, for example, requisitions allow us a moment to soak in the art direction per level, as well as allowing us to collect herbs and minerals so we could fill that requisite, as well as having that little extra bit to customize our weapons. We have the rifts that allow us a moment of cleansing these levels of the major threat that seems a lot more alarming than it is, and then camp spread out across the land, which helps us appreciate the map traveling aspect. I don't mind it, but I could see this being a reason someone go for a third or fourth playthrough, if they even reach their second. But like I said, I had a second playthrough, my nightmare run. Was it tough? Definitely. And I can't tell if it was tough because I ran through the game underleveled and I exploited the shit out of my saves, or if the game was truly challenging and the expectations for strategy were tripled. But about my save exploits, I want to say, BioWare, I am truly appreciative of your prior to starting a mission save that automatically creates before starting a story mission. I know that without that save, I would have been stuck and rage quit it like I've never done before. So yes, every story mission offers revert to last save prior to starting, which was an amazing feature. The challenge in Dragon Age was so rewarding. After every 2 to 3 hours I spent on a mission, I just sit back in awe at how much I was able to accomplish. I am curious though, to all that have played In Your Heart Shall Burn, did it not take you an uncomprehendable amount of time to beat? I swear, dude, I spent an entire day beating that quest. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed my Dragon Age review. and I really appreciate you for watching.